Hi and welcome. I'm Sharon Strine. Thanks for joining me here in my studio on this day of the Rittenhouse Square virtual fine art show. I hope you've been taking full advantage of all the show's online offerings and events. If you're an art lover, there are so many great opportunities to see and hear and learn about some extraordinary artists and their work. If you came here directly, thank you. I'd also encourage you to visit the Rittenhouse Square art website to see even more. So we're not in Rittenhouse Square in Philly, we're in New York City. If you're familiar with the city, we're by the Brooklyn Bridge on the Manhattan side, and I have beautiful northern facing natural light to paint by every day. Before I begin, if you watched my last painting demonstration done 2 weeks ago for the Rittenhouse Square 5 O'Clock Club, I wanted to share the finished piece. So my goal was to paint a tribute to healthcare workers. I spoke a bit about the experience of the pandemic here in New York City. My subject was a young woman, a fourth-year medical student, whose words and actions to me represented the future of medicine and a more hopeful and more universally fair life and health experience for all. To convey that outlook, I created a setting where the direction she's headed, where she's looking, the future in other words, is bright and kind of organic. Her form and her white coat I described with real high contrast and strong brush strokes to portray her strength and her purposeful nature. That was my interpretation. So this piece is now drying. I'll varnish it next and then ship it off to Texas. So I'm starting a new painting today. And I'm beginning by referencing an earlier painting of mine. This piece is titled BFFs, Best Friends Forever. And these little girls are best buddies, and their different skin color doesn't and shouldn't prevent that. So I painted this to show positive diversity. I actually did another painting of them together a little older, and now I want to paint them again as young women, still best friends. So here's where I start, and this is what I'm imagining they would look like today. So let me park this camera and we'll get started. Oh, sorry about my hands in the way. Once I do this, I'll be able to paint and let me know if there's any need for some adjustment. I'm sorry?
Your video is gone. It says, sorry, we're having trouble playing this video.
Folks, can you still see me? Because I've got my husband, cameraman, watching on a laptop, and the video on our system has cut out. So please give me a thumbs up if you are seeing this.
It's back. Yes. It's back. You're good.
Yeah, all right. Good, thank you. So, good, thank you for that. And as I mentioned, my husband's here for camera work and to assist me with any stubborn oil paint tubes I can't manage. And also, if you have questions, he's watching the laptop and will be able to let me know what your questions are so that I can answer them as I paint. So I invite and encourage you to ask me questions. So this is my plan, and this is how I prepare. This is actually a linen canvas that was used for another painting. I can't remember what's underneath this. Probably a live painting study. I do a lot of those. And I will gesso over it and use it once more. Because there was a painting underneath it, there's often the texture of paint left behind, so it's sanding first and then gesso, and then maybe sanding again to prepare a surface for a new painting. Once I have that done, then I do a charcoal drawing right onto the canvas, and I fix it with hairspray to keep it from smearing, and then I paint. I'm going to begin by working with kind of a monochrome palette. I almost always start with the dark areas first, and I have a special formulation for that. I use Van Dyke Brown and Ultramarine Blue. I use that instead of using black. It has more kind of warmth and dimension to it. And I make values of it by adding in white. Sometimes I'll warm it up and cool it down. But basically, that's my black, if you would. And I begin doing the dark areas first. In this case, I may change the plan once I make some progress. But in this case, I'm thinking I will do this in a similar treatment to the piece that I showed for reference, the original BFFs piece. And by that I mean kind of monochrome, kind of keeping it in sepia tones and maybe adding some color. Might do a kind of a subtle blue for the sky. We'll see as we get into it, whatever seems to work for the theme. There's actually a term for this kind of monochrome gray treatment. It's called grisaille, Grisaille, and it a lot of Renaissance painters were known for using this. My recollection of art history is that it was used, its function was to prepare for really kind of ornate sculptural work. And so, it was kind of a study to be done first. It also it's also a legitimate painting process and kind of an acid test for master painters' assistants. It kind of reveals the skill in a way that adding color does not. Sometimes adding color can be more forgiving. So, kind of an interesting historical reference. So I often start paintings this way. More recently, I'm less likely to do a painting with the full grisaille. I will take the drawing stage into a similar territory. I like to establish the form and catch the lights, and it gives me a solid foundation to paint into. It also gives me another stage to just enjoy the process. I'm not worrying about painting over it. I'm just enjoying, kind of enjoying myself and enjoying the materials. Might seem obvious, but it's easy to forget sometimes that the more you enjoy every stage of a painting, the more it kind of propels you to the finish line. Getting very philosophical here. So I go to the darkest areas first. I like to kind of simply, define the expression, define the identity before I go on. Somehow that helps me see the life in these subjects. So I like to do that quickly, and then I'll describe other steps as I go on. I'm going to love doing this hair. This is really cool. This would be a perfect time to give a shout out to Next Up. We're doing this. This could be maybe another 40 minutes for my demonstration. I should mention that I will also be back on and in the studio available by Zoom. I have a virtual booth by Zoom at 2 o'clock. So I'll have time for a break, some lunch, walk the puppy, and be back in the studio. So if you'd like to see me working on this further, see some of my other work, come on back between 2 and 6 today, and you can find the links on the Rittenhouse Square Art website under virtual booths. What I was going to say is shout out to the next artist coming up, and that is Sandy Sedmak Engel. She is the board chair of the Rittenhouse show group. She's our captain, and she also does really cool encaustic painting. So I hope you're free to tune in again back on Facebook Live here at 1 for Sandy, and then there's a whole day full of artists on Facebook Live and on Zoom and on Instagram. Live interviews with artists on Instagram. They're going on as I paint and throughout the weekend. I don't remember if I mentioned that I'm a board member of the art show, and it's been a lot of fun to put this virtual show together. So some rules for myself as at the very beginning. As I mentioned, I like to do the darks. I like to kind of establish the identities. I also look for long lines, kind of gestural lines, and establish soft edges and lost edges. Imagine where the lighting might be. I'm thinking, the lighting in this case is coming from this direction. So although I've, defined that with a hard line, that's likely to be very bright. This will be bright. The shadows get cast in this direction. So I've begun to suggest that in the drawing, but those will be areas to really develop as I paint. So these areas are going to be, as I said, hard edges. Not hard as in leave them as black lines, but hard as in more distinguished from the background once that is established. Any questions yet? One of the things that I expect I'll do sooner rather than later with this one is also suggest a background. Reason being, this hair, this kind of halo of hair, will be almost transparent and kind of feathered out here. And so I'll need the background established first in order to then paint over that. So I'm getting ahead of myself, but thinking ahead. I mentioned I look for gestural lines. I also like to establish points of anatomy. It's important to know where the base of the neck is. When you're doing complete full figures, you establish the base of the neck, and then you look for how that figure is standing, and the base of the neck relates to the weight of how the person is standing. So you want to draw a line from the base of the neck to the heel, basically. You can tell I like doing people. I find anatomy fascinating and challenging. It's really kind of a no-no to go in and work on facial features in the very beginning, but as I said, it's kind of important to me to know these people, kind of identify them first, and I'll capture something in their expression that makes me smile as I paint them, and I like to establish that first. So, having done that. So I go darks, and then some midtones. As I say, my intent for this one, at first anyway, is to do this in that kind of grisaille technique. Maybe, I'll make an exception and do a background that's colorful, blue sky. And I may change my mind once I get further along and decide I'm going to bring them to life. Bring them right here and render it in color.
Is there a connection with vintage photography at all? The hints of color remind me of old tinted photos.
Ooh, what a great question! Yeah, yes, there certainly is, and that kind of gets me started on, I think my original body of work that kicked off my full-time career as an artist. I'll back up. Prior to doing this, well, I've always painted and always drawn, and I went to school for fine art and education, with an emphasis on painting. Once I graduated, though, I went into art in another application, kind of design, and then marketing and communications, and then business management for small businesses and nonprofits and higher ed, and kind of got further and further away from what I'm doing now. But once we moved to New York, which is now almost 7 years ago, I went full in, and painting became my full-time career. I began painting when my mom passed away. I got just a treasure trove of all these beautiful black and white vintage photos. Didn't know who most of the people were, but I could, identify my mom and maybe my grandmom, and they were just so special, and that inspired me to start painting with that palette, and also painting with a theme of kind of old vintage beach settings. As a child, I grew up every summer at the beach, so that connection of childhood at the beach and my mom is what drew me to both the palette and the theme. Even now, I'll keep an eye out for old vintage clothing and vintage bathing suits, and if I see something that I like, I'll that becomes a painting. Long story. Thank you for that question. So I'm kind of going into, I've got a palette here with the mixture of Van Dyke Brown, ultramarine blue, and then shades of it. By shades of it, I mean I start with the very darkest blend, and then I add white. So I've got a palette simple palette of those shades, and I'm just playing with darks and lights, and I'll be kind of loose to begin with. Like I might go back and define this kind of headband further, or I might not. It might look kind of cool, just fluid and brushy. And you'll notice in my works, sometimes I get detailed, and sometimes I leave things real expressive. So once I load up my brush, I just go looking for places that need that that value. So I'll just apply it where I am, where I see a need, and then I'll step back and respond. Kind of see what's next. It was fun to imagine what these young ladies would look like as they grew up together. Kind of identified in the beginning, the taller one, real kind of lanky and leggy, and kind of a longer face, and the little one had this kind of cherubic smile and round face, and fun to imagine what they'd look like as they got older. How's the view? Can you see it okay? Okay.
See the reference sister paint.
feeling there's going to be a need for some contrast elements, and that's one of the reasons I could work in color. I'm trying to remember a single name of a Renaissance painter that is known for that, the grisaille technique. I'm coming up short. There's one name, now I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, I'm sure, but I think it's I-N-G-R-E-S, French. He was known for grisaille. I'm thinking I might go ahead and, you know, I could work on these people for the next hour and get closer and closer, and, you know, establish the range of values that I want to establish. But that's not going to be very interesting for the purposes of a demonstration. So I'm going to cover some sky, just so we can establish that relationship. Oh, I should mention this palette that I was showing you. It's a paper palette, really cool, very portable and easy to work with. I've mentioned before in my earlier painting demonstrations that I have a nifty way of saving the paint on them. Well, at the end of the day, whatever I have on my palette, there's always paint left over, paint mixed, stuff that I want to use as I'm working on this particular project. I even have it handy here today. I will take the sheet of paper, tear it off the pad. I'll take a stretch of this saran wrap and cover the palette, and then I fold that up in quarters. Fold the covered paper palette up in quarters and put it in a Ziploc bag and put it in the freezer. I always like to pass on that tip. It's a great way to save your paint and to have it fresh the next day. How's that looking? You see that okay? Yeah. Now, as I mentioned, I referred to this as a soft edge, a lost edge. When I go back into the clothing, I'll be able to overlap on that and take away that hard drawn edge. But for now, it's given us a nice description of background and light source. Painting a real thin layer, which allows me to cover a lot of ground, paint quickly, and layer on. Now I'm starting to use some of my prepared gray. Yeah, that's gonna drip. To mix into this blue to change the color of the sky, as it will change because of the the light coming from this direction and the temperature of the light.
How long does paint keep in the freezer?
Oh my goodness! I haven't tested that. I have really old paint in there. Yeah, I don't mix like gobs and gobs of paint all at once, and so haven't tested like if you mixed just tubes of it and tried to save it. Would that work? I kind of doubt it. I mean, it lasts as long as a project. And for me, depending on the scale, it can keep for a month. And that's a good thing to do because paints, good paints, like good brushes, are they're expensive. You don't want to waste it. And if you've mixed a whole palette of paints that is just what you wanted and really working well for the piece, you want to save that, and you want to have it to reference as you mix more, match for reference. I'm using some standing linseed oil and some terpenoid to really thin this down in the initial stages. Once I get further along and I want the paint to be a little thicker, then I reduce the amount of that stuff I use. There are lots of different paint additives that serve different purposes. For improving the flow of the paint, for affecting drying time. Lots of reasons that you mix things into paint or don't. Pardon me?
You've got about 10 minutes.
10 minutes, holy smokes. Well, I will definitely be working on this some more this afternoon. I'm just getting started. I feel like I should talk some more about the Rittenhouse show. I mentioned that there are other artists on Facebook Live. There are Zoom studio sessions. If you go to the Rittenhouse Square Art website, it's full of information, information on each artist, the artist schedules, all the live events. But what I really would be remiss not mentioning is that there's an online gallery this time around, this show, which is new for the September virtual show. So you can actually go to the online gallery and purchase artwork directly from the website. There are, each artist has put 4 pieces up on the site that are available for sale, and if you buy from the site, you are supporting both the show and the artists. So I hope you'll take a spin through the gallery. There's some beautiful work and a real wide variety, all sorts of mediums and styles, and it's a really, really strong show, as it is every year. I'm liking this so far.
Do you always like your work?
That's a good question. Someone actually asked that, or that come from you, Michael. Do I always like my work? That's a very good question. Yeah, I always eventually love my work, and I love the process of the work. That said, there are times when I'll be working on something and it's just at a stage where it's like, not loving it yet, but I know where I want it to be, and I just have to kind of push through it to get there. I think that's probably why I have this habit of identifying the people first. I know a lot of artists who do beautiful, wonderful work, who start super loose, super abstract. You can't quite tell what it is, and then all of a sudden it's this beautiful finished figurative piece, and I admire that. For me, somehow it's important for me to establish an identity first, and then work it to conclusion. It might change, but I like to be able to see them. I mentioned in a previous demonstration, even hear them. I kind of imagine what they sound like as I work through. That's just one of the things that I enjoy. Okay, so that's enough background. I mentioned the Instagram interviews. Or did I? I actually have the pleasure of interviewing an artist tomorrow, Annie Goodis, at 2 o'clock tomorrow. And that'll be fun. So once more, take a look at the website, check out the live events, and see if you can stop in on some of these online offerings, whether it's the Zoom stuff, the Zoom studio sessions, the Zoom virtual booths, more Facebook Live presentations. What am I forgetting? And the online gallery. Well, that doesn't seem like 45 minutes of work yet. How am I doing?
You have 5 minutes.
I have 5 minutes? Okay. Probably more important for me to say something than to continue to do this.
How do you know when to stop?
I'm not sure I do always know when to stop. There are times, like, for example, as I bring out this reference painting, this one, the original BFFs, that's been done since 2017, and I look at it now, and I want to, I want to work on it some more. I won't. It's done. It is just what I wanted. But I do have a tendency to look at things and imagine something else, something more, something, and that's what drives me to to continue painting, continue doing new pieces. So I do have a sense of that one's done. It's what I intended. I like it, but that doesn't keep me from constantly just kind of looking back and thinking of maybe something new I've seen, something I've learned, something I want to try, and looking at a previous piece and going, what if? And instead of doing that, I'll do that to the next piece, if that makes sense.
Is this a story you were trying to tell, or is there a set of emotions you want to evoke?
This is probably both. And I think I know that about my work. It is a story. It is something that I want, that I hope people can kind of relate to, they can feel, they can respond to. I do think there's a common thread in my work that I paint kind of the way I either imagine life is, could be, should be, how I believe things should be. Now the vintage stuff, not to say I want to go back in time, but just simple happy times, we live in a very complex world, but basically. People are people, and we have the gift of life, and we should all be kind of tolerant and kind to one another. So that's the moral of the story. Okay. I think I'm happy with 40 minutes progress. And I'm happy that you joined me. As I say, I'll be available by Zoom live today between 2 and 6. I'll be here, I'll be painting. So feel free to jump in and we can chat. I can show you some of my other work that I have out. To see the schedules and also find the links for those Zoom sessions, just go to the Rittenhouse Square Art website, and it's on the event page. All right, I'm done. Thanks so much.